Hi, I'm Karen Herrick, and I'm here to talk about the vagus nerve part three. We've had part one and two, where we discussed how important it was that we breathe through emotions that are triggered by our stomach that tells our brain danger, danger, and activates our heart so that our heart rate goes up and we have panic or PTSD. We discussed that. And how breathing is so important with the vagus nerve. You breathe in and a shorter out in breath and a longer out breath. So you breathe into the count of 4 and you breathe out as far as you can go. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and short and long and short and long. And that calms you down. In fact, I just used that breath to take a little 15-minute nap, and it works beautifully if you are having trouble sleeping, because the more you're counting, the less you can't think about anything else, and so you turn your brain off, which is really a good thing to do. So today we're going to just go into how the vagus nerve can activate spirituality, and it is the channel in your physical body for your central nervous system connecting to the brain, and it's also the channel in that your spiritual body leaves when it goes out the top of your head, when you have an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience, or when you go out the top of your head and you die. And that's when you connect to your soul. And that's a whole other story. And maybe we'll do one of those live. I'm talking about the soul at some point. So let's just talk about breathing. And there have been spiritual writers who have talked about how spirit comes into your body on the breath. Because, of course, if you remember the Bible, when God touched Adam with that famous finger-to-finger picture at the Vatican, breath was breathed into him. So they breathe. That's how you get spirit. And it could be because we need breath. It brings more oxygen in the blood and makes us feel energized. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, though, is many times the reaction to loss and trauma result in a spiritual awakening. And I think what the medical health model needs is more spirituality in their system and a model of spiritual therapy. So a spiritual experience sometimes happens when you are subjected to loss of a job, of your health, of someone you love. And then many times something happens to you. You hear a voice, you feel a presence in the room, and you start to wonder more than you ever have about a higher power and different spiritual processes that happen to us. So first, I'm going to start out with the difference between a spiritual experience and a psychotic hallucination. So a hallucination, which someone in psychosis would have, usually has no basis in fact. And the person that's telling you about that they just saw Buddha or Christ or whatever they're talking about is really grandiose and, going on and on. And one of the things in that story is they can't keep the story the same. So they can't come in and out of it. And if they start a second time to tell you, it's going to be different. All right. But someone who's had a spiritual experience is not inflated, and they can tell you the same story over and over again because it's very difficult to forget when you've had a spiritual experience. And a spiritual experience usually gives an answer to the person having it, even if it takes a while to determine what that answer is. A person is humbled by the experience, can come in and out of the story, and has strength to explain to you what the spiritual experience is. Now, we have people now who have near-death experiences, and if you don't understand a near-death experience, you can go onto Netflix and look up. Let's see, they have a spiritual Surviving Death is what it's called. And the first hour is 5 1-hour shows. The first hour is on near-death experiences. And it tells you about all these PhDs that have had near-death experiences. And they've been verified by, peers and all that stuff. Now, what I want you to know is that normal people are having near-death experiences too. However, a normal person is sometimes waits 7 years to tell you that they had this experience. Maybe they get divorced because they've told their family about the experience over and over, and the family doesn't believe it, and they don't want to hear it anymore. So, 79% of near-death people divorce after having one because of their close relatives or loved ones are not on the same page they're on. And if you've had a near-death and come back, you basically, the main theme of that is that you want to have better relationships in life. And they don't know really what that means, but they're going to try to have more positive relationships after having this near-death experience. Okay, so it's not an easy thing to have a spiritual experience because not a lot of people believe in it. So the definition that I use is a transcendent relationship between a person and a higher being, a quality that goes beyond a specific religious affiliation. Now, these experiences have many names, and the more that we get to talk about spirituality, the more maybe we can congregate these names into just one so that we all would know what we're talking about. So sometimes they're called peak experiences. That's from Maslow. Religious experiences from James. Near-death experiences from Raymond Moody. Transpersonal experiences from Maslow's transpersonal psychology, which includes all the psychologies into one. Paranormal, it's called that. Conversion experience, a spiritual experience, an anomalous experience, which is what psychology calls them, and ecstatic states. So transpersonal and Jungian psychology best explains spiritual experiences because transpersonal psychology encompasses awakening, spirituality, dreaming, and various contemplative states, rather than just studying our usual waking state. So we have William James, Carl Jung, and Abraham Maslow, and their work was transpersonal in nature. Now, there's a book, and in fact, it's an older book, published by the American Psychological Association, and it's called Varieties of Anomalous Experiences. And if you want a copy of my bib for these 3 parts of the vagus nerve, just send me an email at Karen@KarenHerrick.com and put in the subject line, please send copy of vagus. What am I doing here? YouTube and bib, and then I'll send it to you, okay? And we won't share that, your address with anybody else. But you can see a picture of this Varieties of Anomalous Experience, and you can order it if you want to. So that's just to prove that there are psychologists that believe that these things happen, because you don't hear that very often, that psychology supports spirituality. Now, where do these spiritual experiences come from? Well, they come from your soul. And Carl Jung believes that your unconscious holds repressed feelings and memories and is also the 4th dimensional mind contained in your 3-dimensional body. So you have your ego, your consciousness that we're here consciously talking to each other today, or I'm talking to you. And you have your ego right on the line between, if we had a circle, it'd be on the middle of the line. And then below the ego is your unconscious, which Jung believes is more active in your life than Freud. Freud believed it was just a depository of your old memories and feelings and what happened to you and your family. But Jung believes, and I do too from watching it over 30 years, that the unconscious has an intelligence of its own, and it comes alive in people's lives at different times of maybe chaos and problems. Because a crisis is a great time to make it into an opportunity and do something very, very different. All right. So your soul is also located in your unconscious, and your soul is responsible for spiritual experiences. So sometimes they get activated because of what happens in your life. And it's important to remember that we're all part of nature, human beings, and that nature is mechanical. And things like if you think about somebody having a baby, it's the same process, no matter who has the baby, right? What race, what religion, we all go through the same thing. So when we die, we all go through the same process, which we need to know more about. And I'm hoping to talk about that later too. But things happen over and over again in the same way. And so do spiritual experiences. They just come into your life when you are ready. Now, what helps this vagus nerve in your body activate your spirit part that's in your soul? Now, your soul is held in your solar plexus, okay, in your spiritual body. So you have a physical body, and I'm talking to you from now, and the spiritual body we don't usually see. The only time you usually meet your soul is when you die. But now, since 1975, when Raymond Moody wrote the book about life after death, and he said people they died, but they came back. So they had a near death. That's what he named it, right? So since 1975, people have been having these near death experiences. And now people will say, well, did you see the light? So now they know about the light. Maybe they don't know how they know about the light, but that's been talked about on television in all different kinds of programs and all different kinds of ways. But nobody really talks about how does the soul, the spiritual body that holds the soul in your solar plexus, leave? Okay, so one of the ways it leaves is that the vagus nerve starts to vibrate. And things that vibrate have structure. So that we have to learn about the principle of a constant movement, which is vibration, and that every one of us has a rate of movement that is individual. So some people have a higher rate, lower rate, medium, all that. But because of the law of vibration, a person can tune into the subconscious mind and the universal mind to receive psychic and spiritual information. So what we have to remember about that is that vibration causes structure. Now, we breathe, like we said, we breathe into the count of 4, and we breathe out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And sometimes when people go over to the other side, when they come back, what happens is like they're driving down the main street of their town, and all of a sudden they realize they haven't been breathing for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And they pull over to the side of the road, pound on their chest, meditate, pray, do whatever you do when you think, I have to breathe here. That's how we live. But people that have gone over to the other side in a near death and come back sometimes have this where they don't breathe here on earth for short periods. And then they get scared because what they don't realize is once you've gone over to the other side, something has been activated. And I believe it's the medulla oblongata in your brain that activates another kind of breathing on the other side. You can't be over there flying around with the silver cord coming out of the vagus nerve that connects your oxygen and breathing through this little nose, even if it's a bigger nose. They say that you breathe through your whole body. So then when you come back, that process has already been activated in your physical body, and sometimes you don't breathe over here because another kind of breath process is happening, and we need more research on that. But I want people who've had a near death, if they're watching this, to know they don't have to be afraid if they find themselves, driving down Broad Street and they're not breathing. Just pull over and tell yourself you want to breathe again, and it'll activate the physical body. Okay, so the silver cord is this cable, which is, I believe, is wrapped around the vagus nerve, comes out the top of your head, and that people that have a near-death experience, their oxygen rate never changes. Bruce Grayson, in his book After, talks about that. So why does the oxygen rate not change when you're out of your body? It's because you're still connected to your body. The vagus nerve silver cord gives you the oxygen so that you can be flying around there, meeting your grandmother or seeing the flowers and doing whatever they do. So the silver cord connects the physical body and what's called your spiritual body is also called either your astral body or your etheric body. And you also have a chakra system, which is an invisible system up your spine. And that starts, there's like wheels of energy. And that starts when the vagus nerve starts to vibrate. It's also being pushed around by the chakras. And it's also being pushed around by the energy of orgasmic energy that you have in your body. That same system is also working to push this spiritual body up and out. So if you want to find that book that Bruce Grayson wrote about near-death experiences, it was written in 2021, and it's called After. And then in the Bible, it talks about the spiritual cord, the silver cord, and it says that when it's cut, you die. But of course, when you're out there in an out-of-body or near-death experience, nobody's cutting it. And how does that get cut anyway? It just stops vibrating and just separates, right? Okay, so as long as that silver cord is still connected, when you're out there flying around, you're okay. And then they say that something pulls you back in, but they don't know what. But it is the vagus silver cord that gets pulled, and we don't know why, but something decides that you've been out there long enough. Okay. So if you're a therapist watching this, you're going to think, and you haven't been trained in transpersonal psychology or William James or Carl Jung, Karen's really crazy, right? In talking about this. But it's very important as a therapist to learn to have a positive response if somebody comes to you and says they've had a different spiritual experience, right? Because they need to be validated. And then you need to learn about it if you don't know very much about it. And that anomalous book would be good for you to get. Because people are afraid that they're crazy, right? So what do we need to do, even in your family, if someone comes to you and finally says, I had this experience. I went out there, I talked to Uncle Charlie, and I came back. And Uncle Charlie said he's fine, but it wasn't my time yet. So I have to come back here, right? So what do we do? Well, anything the same stuff you do to comfort anybody would be that you would listen to them, right? And can they tell you the same story over and over again? And if they can, then most probably it was a spiritual experience because they have a good observing ego that can tell the story over and over. And then you, as the person listening, holds the story for them. Okay, and so you saw the light, you saw the flowers. What else? And now what's the problem you're having? Well, nobody believes me. All right, well, let's Google near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences or YouTube, where you can get lots and lots of information to help them. And so you're providing them with a framework then that can help them understand and name. If we can name something, that's half of it, really. So you have a name for it, and you have somebody who wrote books about it, and then you have steps about it, different things people see. So, and then what should the person do that is worried about this spiritual experience? Well, they should get some physical exercise. They should start taking care of themselves, and they should gather as much information about it as that they can, and just be calm about it. This has happened to you, and it's a process. It's going to take time to really understand the experience that you've had. So maybe you had a deja vu where you went back in a past life. Maybe you left your body, like we've been talking about. Maybe you prayed and you saw an angel. I had a client come to me one time, and she prayed for 90 days to have her life changed. And then she was starting to see negative spirits under her bed at night, and they were mean. And she found my name somewhere on the internet, and she said that the positive spirits said that I would help her. And I did. I saw her for about 1.5 years. I didn't charge her because I used her story in a chapter in my last book, The Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal. It's called The Making of a Medium. And it's interesting about these mediums because usually they have had somebody in their family who had, maybe they had an ancestor who read tea leaves or who played around with astrology or had visions, which they explain in the Bible. But somebody in the family usually has had something like this that maybe they just played around with. Like I remember I had a client whose grandmother used to read tea leaves on Saturday night, and she said it was just a game. And she'd read them for anybody that was there. And then she'd go to church the next day because she was Catholic, and she would go to confession and say that she read the tea leaves, because in the Catholic faith, you're not supposed to do anything like that, right? But they had a good time with it. But that really is a paranormal gift, that you can read tea leaves and get signs from tarot cards or from numbers, from anything that will help you explain to a person what's happening in their life. But these people are afraid. Sometimes they get angry that when they came back from a near death or the spiritual experience that they had, that now it's gone. All those wonderful feelings are gone, and they're stuck with this dark gray world that we live in compared to, apparently, the light that's on the other side and the color of the flowers and all that stuff that they see. They're here now, and nobody believes them. So we really do need more information about how this happens in the body, and that it does happen to people, that they have certain spiritual things that religion doesn't explain to anybody. So psychology needs to step in here and, listen to William James and Carl Jung, because they were talking about it in the early 1900s, and trying to teach people then. And I don't know, I think I read somewhere or else somebody said that Carl Jung was like wanting to knock his head against a concrete wall for some of these psychologists he was talking to who didn't seem to understand what he was talking about, because he was talking about all the things that I've just been telling you about. And they're not taught about this in psychology classes. You could take a psychology class about James and Jung, which is usually only 6 weeks, and they're not going to tell you anything about mediumship, that they both believed in that. They both went to mediums. Carl Jung had a mother who was a medium, a cousin who was a medium, a grandfather who with his second wife at lunch would talk to his first wife on the other side who was deceased. None of that you get in psychology class, but it all happened and it's all real. So people that have had all these different things happen to them, and maybe things that happen to their body that they don't understand, feel isolated. They have nobody to talk to. So that's what I'm hoping to increase in talking to you guys on the YouTube, and that you'll have questions. And maybe you can, if you have a cousin who went through some of this, send them my YouTube video and let him watch it. All right. So what have near-death experiences taught us, right? That we're all energy, and that we each have a unique story about our life, no matter what it is. And when that story ends and we're ready to go to the other side, there's a shift. And when people are dead, so-called dead, they are calm and peaceful. One of the things they talk about is, they feel so free because they're not in this body anymore. They're up above, flying around. And they say that's when you have to come back in. It's like coming back into a sausage casing. So it isn't free when you come back in. And they're now a soul. So on the other side, you take your consciousness, your unconsciousness, and your mind with you. And that is part of your soul. So you can always think over there. Now, when you go to the other side, one of the problems about this thinking is that people don't talk over there. They read your thoughts. So you can't be saying one thing and meaning another, because they can read what you're thinking and you can read what they're thinking. So supposedly we all go to certain like-minded people, whatever that means. So I would go to my group, you would go to your group, etc. So once you go the other side, you're now a soul which contains your mind. And then deceased loved ones, angels, or spiritual guides appear to you, and they greet you, and they show you what you are to know, especially if you are to come back, before you're told to return to Earth. And so Carl Jung had a vision. He was in the hospital and he had a heart attack. And while he was in that bed, and apparently then they didn't get you up for 2 weeks if you had a heart attack, he just left his body. And he didn't go up and see the light. He went out around the Earth. So the way he describes this vision in his book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, he describes like photographs to you that you've seen from the astronauts and what they sent back. He could see the circle of Earth. He could see the Himalayas. He could see different places he'd visited. And he was out there, and he also saw this box. It was a nice big box coming toward him. And he knew if he opened that box that he would know if he completed his purpose here. And that was very important to him. And just as he's about to open the box, his young doctor flies by and says to him, "What are you doing out here? Get back in bed." And he's right back in his hospital bed immediately. And he was so angry because he never found out if he had completed his purpose in life. And then he said to the doctor, because I believe Jung was clairvoyant, he had gifts, and he didn't talk about those gifts because that wasn't popular in psychologists, just like it isn't popular now. And the doctor said, "Oh, that's ridiculous." And Jung said, I was almost dead, and you were out there with me, so I think you're going to die. And he said that was just dumb. He didn't want to hear any more of that stuff. So 2 weeks later, when Jung was allowed to stand and walk around, his doctor died. So Jung knew things that other types of psychologists didn't. Okay, but you're over the other side, and they tell you you can't stay, and you really like it because you can feel all this love and light and a lot more, and it's only good over there. So apparently we're shown what we were supposed to know, and then you're returned here. And when you return to Earth, everybody tells about this wonderful light that they see on the other side. So I think that more mental health practitioners, doctors, need to work together for the benefit of all people, whether they're your client or your relative or your friend. So I hope I've increased your awareness a bit about the physiology of the body and how it affects spiritual experience. And you probably have lots of questions, which I hope you do, because I want to go on live and just receive your questions someday in the near future. And I hope we can have chats about it and we can get everybody's opinion who's on the chat. So as we all struggle to change what we know about spirituality and the soul and these physical things that happen to us, we're changing the consciousness of Earth. And that's a good thing. So I want to read you a story that sometimes I read after the Vegas. And it's called The Parable of Twins. And this author, it comes from Our Greatest Gift, which is a Harper One book, Harper One, 2009. And this man wrote about these twins in the womb discussing the notion of life after birth. So here it goes. Once upon a time, they were twin boys who were conceived in the same womb. Weeks passed and the twins developed. And as their awarenesses grew, they laughed for joy. Isn't it great? Isn't it great to be alive in here? Isn't it great that we were conceived? And together those twins explored their world. And when they found their mother's cord, which gave them life, they sang for joy. And how great is our mother's love that she shares her own life with us. And again, the celebration continued. And as weeks stretched into months, though, the twins noticed how much each other were changing. "What does it mean?" asked one of them. "It means our stay in this world is drawing to an end," said the other. "But I don't want to go," said the one. "I want to stay here always." Ah, we have no choice, said the other. But maybe there's life after birth. Oh, but how can there be? How can that be? Whined the first. We will shed our life cord. And how is life possible without it? Because we've never seen evidence of life after birth. I mean, there's evidence all around us of others who are here before us, but none of them return to tell us that there's life after birth. Maybe this is the end. If conception ends at birth, what is the purpose of life in the womb? It's meaningless. Maybe there's no mother after all. But there has to be, says the other. How else did we get here? And how do we remain alive? Have you ever seen our mother? Asked the first. Maybe she only lives in our minds. And maybe we just made her up because the idea made us feel good. And so their last days in the womb were filled with deep questioning and fear. And the moment of birth arrived. And when the twins had passed from their old world, their eyes were opened, and they cried. For what they saw exceeded their fondest dreams and wildest imaginings. And tenderly, and so tenderly, their mother cradled them in her arms. So it seems like when you leave this world, you have the vagus cord and the silver cord taking you out. And when you come in, you have the cord of the mother's womb. So whether you're leaving or coming, you have a cord. So I want to thank you for joining me again on part 3. And I am going to have these put on YouTube Live. And then I will see what kind of a response I get and what kind of questions. And please feel free to email me. And the email will be put up on the screen. And you can go to Amazon if you want to see any of my books, which are You're Not Finished Yet, Grandma, What is a Soul, and the Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal. Grandma, What is a Soul is a children's book, and it tells you very, in a very childlike way, how your ancestors come to be and that they're always watching over you. So that might be the easiest book to get first. So Karen at KarenHerrick.com. And then KarenEHerrick.com is my website. And there are other podcasts on there and lots of information if you want to check on what else I have done that's up there. So life is mainly about growth and should be because as Carl Jung believed, you have a soul purpose when you come into this world. And your purpose is to know what your soul purpose is. So I hope I've helped you a little bit with that. And I wish you love and peace on your journey. And thank you for joining me.